and welcome to another episode of Tory Talks. I'm Sam. This is...
Hello, I'm Ian.
It's really weird you not being next to me. And we're doing this at a social distance this week.
Yeah, we're not actually this close together. We are socially distanced for this. You can see into my house for a change.
How exciting!
I'm not too sure about that. I have gone for the obligatory bookshelf look. I think as anybody in the politics world seems to have only be pictured in front of a bookshelf. And saying that, Sam, I'm a little bit disappointed that you haven't got a bookshelf behind you, but you probably won the day because there's a Union flag instead.
And it's ironed. So a lot of things I see, they put a flag up and then it's not ironed, and it really, really bothers me. So this one's ironed. But the problem is my bookshelf has just craft books. So I'm not got loads of political books because, let's be honest, you're only going to read it once. So I used to just get them from the library. I don't keep my books, my political books. So yeah, that's why I'm not in front of a bookshelf, because I think it'd be quite embarrassing to see gardening with kids and and all that in the background. So I thought I went for the usual.
I've taken my copy of Kama Sutra off the bookshelf for this particular episode, but it'll be back in next week. I did have to check behind me that there was nothing too embarrassing.
Take all the paw now.
Oh no, I've left that in. Yeah. Those with an eagle eye and a zoom lens might be able to find that. Yeah. So,
anyway.
So we did discuss trying to have a Tory talks and not discussing coronavirus. But I suppose that's probably not really possible, is it?
No, because everything is corona related. There isn't anything that goes by without. I mean, there's not even any sport on anymore. It's literally just corona. So I don't know how you're feeling, but I'm a little bit about it all.
I suppose I'm quite fortunate in a way because I'm still going to work every day. And once I'm at work, it's kind of like a coronavirus free zone. Apart from the extra signs we've got up everywhere at work, limit your movements and wash your hands. And, there's little signs everywhere at work. Apart from that, I've still got that bit of my routine, and because I can't work from home. So it's probably a little bit easier for me than it is for most people. And because we don't have children, we probably don't notice as much of a change as some people do. Obviously, I notice it with my council work, and I notice it with the amount of shopping I have to do for other people at the weekends. But no, I'm probably a little bit better off than you because you're doing the whole self-isolation, aren't you?
Yeah, so I think it's day 19, 20. I can't even remember now. So I haven't been anywhere near a shop or anything. I've just purely been at home with the kids, gone for my daily walk. That's it. So yeah, I knew we were quite different, but then this just shows how different we are, because right now our lives couldn't get any more different if they tried. So yeah, I'm homeschooling, I'm working from home, feeling it at times because I'm quite a sociable person, aren't I? So I don't tend to be on my own quite a lot. So I'm trying to keep the morale up. So any sort of conference calls I've been doing and stuff, I've been dressing up in fancy dress and just trying to sort of, people don't know what they're going to get from me each day. So it's like, whoa, okay, you're a beef eater today. So I'm trying to sort of keep spirits up and all that. But I'm just worried that I'm going to end up being in my own little fantasy world, and then I'm going to actually have to go out and not dress as a princess anymore. And that will be a bit of a shame.
Well, you never know. And I suppose one thing to notice, which I know we'll bring up today, is unintended consequences of, intended and unintended consequences of this current crisis. And you might find that people do change. You might find that people's habits do change. Those people that are used to, going out every evening, socialising with their friends every evening, perhaps going to the pub or whatever, this extended period of lockdown very well may change their outlook on lots of things.
Yeah, I think it depends on how it goes on for. So I was reading the psychology of people's routine, and apparently once you get to about 12 weeks, that's when you click into, okay, this is my new normal. And so I think, if it's a short-term thing, which it doesn't look like it's going to be, then we'll probably all go back to how we used to be, or the majority of people. But if it's more than 12 weeks, this is going to become our new normal. And so it might be a little bit more difficult to adjust. And that's one of the reasons why when you're on tour in the army and things, they have R&R at a certain point, so that it doesn't, you get a break from that and it doesn't become your normal, your new normal. So yeah, it all depends on how long this isolation goes on for, really. But I think
And what's your opinion? What's your opinion on how long it will go on for?
I don't want to say really, but I'm mentally preparing for at least 12 weeks. So wow. Okay. Yeah, in addition to the 3 weeks I've already done. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm mentally preparing for. I've got, well, you know me, I'm a bit of a planner anyway, so I've got a short-term plan, everything I want to achieve in the next 4 weeks, and then everything I want to achieve in the next 6 months, in preparation of what I can do to make sure that I fill up my time in 6 months if I am completely out of the real world for that amount of time. I don't know whether that's crazy or what, but that's my coping mechanism.
I'll tell you in a few weeks whether it's crazy or not. Can anybody really tell? And again, it's totally different for me, because as far as I'm aware, our business is going to stay open for the duration. I believe that if there is a total lockdown, similar to what they've got in Northern Italy at the moment, where only essential businesses stay open, that we very well may stay open anyway. I'm not entirely sure. We're just in discussions with people at the moment. It's just simply because we supply a lot of infrastructure to the electricity supply network. So I don't know whether that qualifies us or not. As a business that's going to stay open, but if there's a further lockdown, and then I suppose when I'm at home, the first thing I'm doing every day when I get home is catching up with the council stuff, because the one thing that's obvious at the moment is that we're not having meetings. So the government has just passed the legislation for councils to be able to hold virtual meetings, which has never happened before in the past. And I know a lot of councils are currently working on how that might work and how that might happen. But obviously, there's still an amazing amount of things to be done and decisions to be made. And so, yeah, it's certainly not your usual run-of-the-mill council stuff, but it's probably concentrating on the people that we really need to concentrate on. And I suppose that's our first unintended consequence, is the amazing community spirit that has shone through throughout this. And so much so, and I don't know if other areas of the country are similar, but there's lots of organised help out there at the moment, lots of helplines set up by councils, lots of organised help from organisations like Aid UK and food banks. And they're actually finding that they've got a lot of extra capacity, because a lot less people have signed up to them than they thought, because a lot of the help is actually coming from people within the community.
Yeah, I mean, I work for a Conservative association, and we sent out an email to our members this week, which was all the information of all the help that you can get that's out there from Suffolk County Council, and the funding there and what numbers to call. And when I was sent the email to then send out, I was amazed by how much there was available, because personally, it's a really uncomfortable feeling for me, but I'm completely out of it. I'm one of those people that are getting my food delivered from friends and relying on other people. I'm not in the mix like I normally am, so I just had no idea what was already out there. And this email just seemed never ending with the amount of stuff. So that's really, really good to see, because we've always struggled in the last sort of 10 years, I say, with getting volunteers, because the older generation seemed to be, it seems to be in their DNA to come out and volunteer. And then as the generations have moved on, especially my generation, millennials, I don't know whether you're a millennial, I never mentioned that.
No.
But we just, the psychology around who volunteers, it doesn't seem to be there with millennials unless you're going to get a qualification out of it. So I've worked for a charity in the past in A&E, and we've really, really struggled to replenish the older generation who's then become too old to volunteer. We haven't been able to get the younger ones in, and so seeing the amount of volunteers and seeing the amount of stuff that we're doing in our community is quite exciting from someone like myself and you who we do stuff in the community, to know that this could have a really positive consequence in the future, of knowing that these people might just love it. You get a real buzz from helping others, don't you? And so hopefully that will continue when the apocalypse is over. You think?
Well, I'd love to think so. I would say so. There are a couple of apps around. Nextdoor is one that seems to be one that a lot of people are using, and so it seems in our area, for example, the Nextdoor app from my area, as soon as anybody goes on there asking for any help, within less than 5 minutes, they've had more than one offer of help. So much so that one of the community engagement officers from the borough council has actually started, when they're obviously contacted by people who are in need of some help, rather than directing them towards some of the more formal based organisations, is literally posting onto this Nextdoor app, because he knows the reaction is really, really quick. So, for example, I've noticed today there was 3 separate requests this morning from this guy who works at the council on this Nextdoor app, and it was specific people. And he obviously he only put the general area that they were in. He didn't put their actual names because of GDPR and all that, but that they were needing prescriptions picked up today. And all of them individually, they weren't all at the same time, and all of them individually, within 5-10 minutes, had all had somebody on the app going on, contacting the guy from the council, putting their name forward, and then really handy, the guy from the council then comes back and says, "We're sorted. This one's sorted now. I don't need anybody for this. But if anybody's still got any extra time, could you help with this?" And so I saw he was doing that this morning, so I actually rang him at lunchtime, and I said, "How come you're using this and not some of the official help that you're obviously setting up yourselves?" And his actual answer was that it's quicker. It's far quicker for him. He just has to write a few lines on Facebook, share it onto this app, and within 10 minutes, the problem that he had was sorted. Yeah. So obviously that does work for the single people and the ones and twos that obviously ring him. We do need the let's not beat around the bush. We do still need this organised help, because it is the organised help. We're hoping within the council that by the end of this week, so hopefully by the end of the weekend, the supermarkets will have the system in place to help the 1.5 million of the most vulnerable, so that they can have priority over the online booking system. But yes, I would love to think that not only helping, but bringing communities together. You're seeing communities and street groups set up and do their own things. I've seen quite a lot of Facebook videos where people in the streets are coming out at certain times and singing certain songs, having a dance off. There's neighbours that have taken down fence panels between their gardens, so they're chatting from garden to garden, and it's that kind of community. So I think we can always find people to help, but it's that kind of community spirit that I do think will actually survive past this. I won't call it an apocalypse, because my personal opinion is that this is far from an apocalypse, but that's a different story altogether. But certainly one of the unintended consequences is just seeing how much people want to help.
Yeah, and I think it's really heartwarming, actually, because being out of it, I had this bit of a panic of like, oh my gosh, like, I don't know whether I all of a sudden thought I was really important or something, but I was like, I'm not going to be part of the organising team, therefore it's all going to fall down, I guess, in my area. But because I've been out, people have been helping me, and they're saying like, it's given us an opportunity to step up. And so, if there are a lot of controlling people, I guess, like me, then it may dampen other people to have the confidence to step up. So, that's a positive as well. I didn't realise that maybe people just leave me to get on with it because I'm a little bit but yeah, so people have said it's given us the opportunity to sort of help you out and other people around because you're out of the picture.
They do, sometimes I think that help is actually easier to accept when it's from a neighbour or somebody that lives close to you, rather than official channels. You have to remember that there are okay, the majority of us don't mind dealing with official channels, but there are an awful lot of people out there in the hard to reach category that won't touch official channels, and if it's somebody from the council comes calling, they don't want to know. If it's a local resident that lives in their street that maybe can empathise a bit more with them, they're actually more likely to accept the help. So actually, it's meaning that the hard to reach people actually don't fall through the net. But as much as you do obviously offer help to everybody, I think, and this is something for really people and the general public to actually understand, because I'm getting a lot of contact from people and there's a lot of noise on social media about homeless people. And I see people taking pictures of homeless people in Ipswich and moaning at the authorities for not doing anything. But I must say that the people, and I can only talk about the area that I represent, but I'm pretty sure, because this has come from central government has sent a missive round to all councils that all people on the streets must be off the streets, regardless of how much it costs. To that extent, 2 days ago, at Ipswich Council, we signed a deal for £150,000 with a local hotel to book out some rooms to keep some homeless families in there. Now, we've got a lot of homeless provision in Ipswich anyway, but the ones you're seeing on the streets, if there's people on the streets now in Ipswich, it's because they've refused help. And they've refused all offers of genuine help that can be offered. So I don't want people to think that perhaps it's heartless, that these heartless Conservatives are not doing anything, because they have to remember that it was the Conservatives. We've got a Labour-run council here in Ipswich, but it's the Conservatives that sent round the instruction to get everybody off the streets. And it might be that, that could also be another unintended consequence of this, that, we do realise that if we do have the inclination and the wherewithal, then we actually can get people off the streets. It's always seemed to be a bit of an impossible task or a pipe dream when somebody says, I'm going to eradicate homelessness, I'm going to eradicate rough sleeping by 2025. The next couple of weeks and few months should show people that actually it is possible. And I think that could be a really positive consequence of this crisis, is that we realise it's certainly easier for us to identify where the hard to reach people actually are, but we'll also realise that some things that people think are impossible aren't actually impossible, and are possible and aren't as difficult to reach as what some people think they are.
Well, this is the frustration about other things that I've noticed that we can do because of this, that I've personally wanted to happen for a long time. We asked a question about whether we could make council meetings more accessible. You asked, it's been raised, hasn't it, about council meetings, whether we could film them, whether we could make it all more accessible to people. Obviously, that's been said, it's been said no. We know that that's possible. We know the technology is there. We know it's not expensive. Now that we're in a situation where we're forced to look at other avenues, turns out we can do this all along. So I think another positive will be when we go back into the real world as such, there's no excuse anymore for not making things more accessible to the public, such as televised meetings. I thought about, say, as a single mum, if I was a counsellor and I couldn't have childcare for whatever reason, there is no reason why we can have the technology now that I could still attend a full council meeting, for example, but via this. Because we're proving that we're making provisions now. So in the future, when it comes to, okay, we need to make this more accessible, when councils start saying no, we're going to say, okay, well, back in the day when I'm going to call it the apocalypse happened, we did make those provisions, we did make those changes. So you're saying no because you just don't want to put the effort in. We know the technology is out there because we're all using it. Same as home working and that kind of thing. I think the world is going to change for the better and it's going to be more accessible. I'm hoping, because there's no excuse anymore.
Well, okay, so certainly would have dragged some people in the 21st century that weren't even in the 20th century before. Obviously, there'll be people using video calling now for the first time. There'll be a group of people, and a lot of the older people in our society obviously are using some forms of connectivity now they've never even heard of before. Well, the app that we're using to do this, I'd not heard of this before 2 weeks ago. So a lot more people are doing that. On the home working front, I am slightly concerned about that. Because yes, it has shown that a lot of jobs can be done at home. It has shown that a lot of companies have got the ability to homework when they didn't necessarily think they had before. But we don't want an unintended consequence being that more companies force people to work from home.
Yeah.
Because let's remember at the moment that a lot of people are working from home, but not in ideal situations. Far from ideal. They might have kids around them as well. They've not got the proper setup. They're probably sitting at a breakfast bar or something like that and it's okay for a short period of time, but it's not necessarily okay. But I know for a fact that our council in Ipswich, they will be looking at the number of people they've got working from home, and they've got nearly 400 or 500 people working from home, and they will think, oh, hold on, we could rent out another whole floor of our council building and make an extra £250,000 a year by forcing all these people to work from home. I wouldn't want an unintended consequence to be people were forced to work from home. I'd like the offer to be there, but I wouldn't want to get into a situation where the majority of office jobs are done from home just because it can be.
Yeah, and there's also the question of mental health issues around home working and isolation. So I've done both working from home 100% and flexible working. So obviously I have a disability. I say obviously, I have a disability. It might not be so obvious. And so when I worked in the city on the days that I'm in my wheelchair, what were you going to say? Go on.
Nothing. I was going to ask mental or physical.
Both. But my physical disability is sometimes I have to use a wheelchair, and so commuting into London, we all know that it's not the easiest, and so I had flexible working, so I could work from home on the days that I was in my wheelchair. Not every company offers that, and so I've done that, and the positives of actually going into an office is you see people. You can go over to someone's desk and say, oh, I need to ask this question, instead of sending an email and then them just ignoring you. You can have the office banter and the team meetings and build up the rapport. If you're 100% working from home, you don't have that connection. You don't have that relationship. So I think that if you're going to do flexible working, then you should absolutely have maybe one day a week where you all meet as a team, because there is, mental health impacts on complete isolation, which we're going to see soon.
That's definitely right, but let's not forget that home working at times when there wasn't a coronavirus going on wouldn't involve self-isolation. So yes, of course, it's more communal if you're working in an office and you can obviously speak with people. But let's not forget, if you are home working and we don't have a lockdown, you're still free to do whatever you want in your spare time. So it's not as bad as that. But certain, I just wouldn't want. I'd love the choice to be there, and I think it will show some companies that they have got a choice to do that. And so an unintended consequence could actually be that you see much smaller office blocks than you used to.
Yeah.
And you may very well see, as we know, town centres are changing. You may very well see that tall office blocks that used to be full of workers now may turn partly residential, because obviously firms realise they don't need to rent as much space as they would have done before.
Yeah.
Another unintended consequence, which certainly we've noticed here, and I know other parts of the world have noticed it, and they really noticed it in China, is air pollution.
Yeah.
So we suffer quite badly from air pollution in Ipswich. We have 5 air quality management areas, all of which at the moment would not be air quality management areas on current statistics. We're showing 30 to 40% decreases in air pollution in some of the worst areas in Ipswich. Now, when that's attributed, studies have attributed 65 deaths a year to that in Ipswich, but they've attributed something like 25 to 30,000 deaths nationally.
Yeah, so I looked at
now,
Public Health England, and they said they estimate between 28,000 and 36,000 deaths a year through long-term exposure to air pollution.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's long-term exposure, so just having a few months of where we have a lockdown. But again, I think that shows what can be done, and I think that shows the difference that all the traffic make. So I'd like to think that. Now, I was speaking to somebody today whose parents are from Italy. They're from a rural part of Italy, but their father was speaking to them the other day, and he was actually telling him that this is the Italy that he could smell as a child. He could actually smell the difference in the air because although it's a rural part, they're on the edges of a city, and they're in the north, so it's quite industrial up there. So lots of factories, and they can actually notice the difference. And I don't know if you saw any of the pictures from China when they were on lockdown. Some of the air pollution in China virtually disappeared within 2 or 3 days. So I think it is a stark reminder to people just how much difference the human interaction has. I know I'm not being any coronavirus related things. I'm touching my face. I'm touching my eyes. But I've sanitized my hands before I did this, and I shall do it afterwards as well.
Why don't you do a Dominic Raab and just lick your finger and change the page? By the way, that's just a pet hate of mine. I've always hated it. When I worked in a cash office, and people would lick their fingers to give me the cash, I'd be like, what? It's so disgusting. I don't know why people do that. So I hope that people just stop doing really rank things like that after this as well, because they start thinking about their actual hygiene and how they're spreading. So,
well, I was actually speaking at work today, and obviously the 2 meter self distancing, that's never going to continue. Social distancing after this is finished. But the one thing that should actually do is it should, and we've probably all been guilty of this at some stage, but what this should actually do is that it should actually remind people to stay off work when they're not feeling very well. We've all been to work with a cough and a cold, which was probably flu related. And then, we've all heard stories where somebody gets it and then somebody else gets it and then somebody else gets it. But it might actually make us think more because we kind of like write off the common cold and flu and whatever. Most of us don't think anything of going to work when we've got a cough or we've got a runny nose or whatever. So it might make people think a lot more about how they interact with other people and how what they do affects other people's everyday life. But also, it's probably going to have an effect on companies and monitoring their staff. See, at the moment, let's face it, if you're walking down a corridor at the moment and you walk past somebody's office and you see them having a coughing fit, within 5 minutes, some HR department would have sent them home. Whereas 4 or 5 weeks ago, you wouldn't say anything. You just walk past and make some kind of funny, jokey comment about them having a smoker's cough. You wouldn't even think twice about sending them home. Whereas realistically, of course they should be at home. So I think that's definitely going to change a lot. Our perception of what when we should be at work and when we shouldn't be at work. That's definitely going to change long term, and the way employers look after their staff.
Yeah, but are you going to change? Because you're saying all this, but time and time again, I've called you and you have sounded like you were about to die. You've sounded that rough, and you just go, "Well, I don't do sick day." So would you?
Well, this is just it. It's so no. Only the strong HR person, because you know me. I'm stubborn as a mule, and my personal opinion on this is that lots of people are talking about an exit strategy on coronavirus. The only exit strategy that there is for the majority of the population to get it, or to have had it, or to carry the antibodies. That's the only way out of a virus like this. So, I've got slightly different views on that. But would I change? I think I'd probably have to. I mean, let's face it. I know that if I wake up on Monday and I've got a dry, persistent cough, I'd have usually gone into work. Now, I wouldn't go into work this Monday purely for the fact that if I drove all the way there, they'd turn me around and they'd send me straight back home again. But as from next week, well, when they turn up anyway, we should be having some forehead thermometers turn up. You know, one of those infrared things you do from a distance, turn up at work on Monday, and nobody will be starting work without being tested first.
Interesting.
And I actually think that might become common. I'm being serious. That very well might become common.
Can you imagine a world where, like, you go on a date and then you've just got this, like, attachment to your phone and you're like, don't come anywhere near me, and you just scan them?
It may happen.
Yeah. So, like, 10 years' time, that would be the norm, is you just scan someone's head before you date them.
Loads of things are going to change from this. And a really good thing that I think could change from this is, and you're saying it sitting in front of a Union Jack, there's been a massive rise in nationalism. Now, personally speaking, I see nothing wrong with nationalism. Anybody from the left of politics will tell you that nationalism is absolutely awful, but you've noticed it, and the European Union is very crumbling before our eyes.
Yeah.
You know, France banning transporting of PPE between countries, France quarantining things that, you know, the NHS have ordered things from French manufacturers, which they've then quarantined and said, no, you can't have it out of the country. And it's really, really every man for himself as far as Europe's concerned at the moment. And, you know, I think one of the good consequences is that when this all dies down, we're going to realise that we're actually going to have to manufacture more in this country. You know, one of the issues about PPE is that a lot of the PPE that we have, because it's low value, we don't do a lot of low value production in this country, because we tend to be more technical on our production side. But we're going to have to, you know, I believe when this is all done and dusted, that countries are going to look really long and hard into being not necessarily self-sufficient, but I don't think you're going to have as many extended global supply chains in low value products as what you had before. I think there's going to be a mass, not boycott is the wrong word, but I think that certainly people will look to do business with the companies that have perhaps helped. Just little things like I was talking to my mum the other night, and she's in the market for a new vacuum cleaner. She's almost definitely going to get a new vacuum cleaner from GTEC, the company that's making the ventilators. She'd have never bought a vacuum cleaner from GTEC before, but she's only the reason she said that is because, oh, look what they're doing for the country, so I want to do something for them. Yeah. And I do think, you know, there's people that are profiting out of this. So, for example, I've paid the equivalent of £42.50 per bottle for some 500ml bottles of hand sanitizer this week because we had to have them for work. You can bet your bottom dollar we'll never be doing business with that company ever again. So although they've got business now, they've lost it in the future.
Yeah.
But I think that companies that do offer their assistance, which is another reason why I think you've got such a rush of all these companies to offer their help, I think they will see massive benefits when this is finished. And I think because, you know, this is where perhaps we might be quite well placed in this, and I say might, and I say it with a lot of reserved judgment, because of the no-deal Brexit planning that we did, we've done stress tests on all of our major supply chains, so we know exactly where the pinch points are and where the problems are, which most countries won't have even considered those kinds of tests. Yeah, although the media would lead you to believe that we're short of this, short of that, short of something else, my guess is that we have got as secure supply chains for food and medicine and essential supplies as any country in the world.
Well, this is Matt Hancock kind of hinted at it yesterday in his the Daily Damage report, as I refer it to. You know, he hinted at, because of the preparation that we were doing for No Deal Brexit, we had all these, you know, this in place. And I was actually in a group chat with my Leavers of Suffolk group, and we were talking about Brexit because there's concerns that there's going to be a further delay. But you know, I don't feel, because of the preparation that we've been doing and because of this, that there needs to be a delay in terms of Brexit. I think we'll be in a stronger position because of COVID-19, that we could just leave with a no deal, which is, you know, what I personally want anyway. But yeah, it's interesting to see the other countries and, the reaction within the European Union. The Italians burning their European Union flags and feeling very much being left on their own. And it's kind of bringing to light this, like you say, the very much every man for himself. And we're coming to realise that we can turn things around really quickly when we need to. So we've built a hospital almost from scratch very quickly. We're going into lines of work that we haven't done for a long, long time, but we have got manufacturing there. We just need to look at it. And I think there'll be a massive, massive change in the future, and doing a lot of things from home, which is very much what we should be doing anyway. Because this isn't going to be the last time that we have an outbreak like this. We're not going to get over corona and then there won't be another replacement. It will come in time, so we need to be more prepared for it. So I think
it may not come in time if the Chinese stop eating live wild animals.
Well, they've gone back to, I don't know if they have, but what I've seen, the footage I've seen is they've gone absolutely back to their old ways, eating whatever they want, doing what they do, and so I don't think this is the last time we're going to have a bug or a virus.
So there are some provinces in China that have already banned the consumption of live wild animals, and I know it probably will become nationwide at some stage, but it's a cultural thing, and it's going to take a generation to get rid of that. But certainly, the global nature of the economy means that obviously when you have something like this, it obviously decimates the whole world. And I say the only saving grace, I believe, for the Western democracies is the fact that they've pretty much all been hit by this at the same time. So it'll be a bit of a level playing field. Unlike the last financial crash, which really affected countries that had got a large banking sector more than the others, which is why we suffered, Germany suffered, the States suffered. They didn't suffer anywhere near as much in France, for example, because they don't have a bigger financial sector. But because this is pretty much affecting certainly all Western democracies, we're going to all start off from a very similar place when this is all over. It's interesting though, because from what I understand, Sweden seems to be doing totally different from all other countries in Europe.
They're not doing anything, are they?
They have done some. So they've limited gatherings. Now I can't remember if they've limited gatherings to 500 or 50. I think it's 50, but it's not 2. Most shops are still open. They are
open as well.
They are practicing a level of social distancing, but they're nothing like any of the others. And that's quite strange because they're considered to be quite a socially liberal country, and they do spend a lot on healthcare and everything like that. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. And I don't know if you've heard of Belarus, one of the old Russian states. So
you're obsessed.
I am, because it's going to be look. So the world is going to look to Belarus if they don't change their laws, because it will be a real eye opener, because their president has basically refused point blank to bring in any kind of changes at all, to the extent that they've got cases in their country. They've middle of the week they had just over 100 cases in their country. Their president has been on their national television telling people that if they eat their breakfast at the right time, have 50 mils of vodka every day and a sauna, that should see them through the worst of this crisis. Now, Belarus really is a country that's quite rural and has got quite an aged population and isn't very rich. So you'd think that it's the type of place that this virus could have the ability to absolutely sweep through. But I think there'll be a lot of countries looking on it. I know we're laughing and joking about it, but there'll actually be a lot of countries looking on that and thinking, what difference are we going to see? Because the one thing that I'm really noticing at the moment is, with the barring 2 exceptions, one of which is China, which nobody believes, and the other being South Korea, which is either a mistake with numbers, or it does highlight the fact they've got a very obedient society. Everybody's graph for this COVID death rate is exactly the same. They all superimpose onto each other, and each of the countries have got a varying different degrees of lockdown. Yet they all seem to be traveling exactly the same path. Because my thoughts on this are that it's such a contagious disease, and there are such a high percentage of people that get it that are asymptomatic, that it's actually impossible to stop the spread. And my personal opinion is that we're wasting our time. I would personally isolate and lock down everybody from one of the vulnerable groups, and I would let the rest of the country go about their business. Because, if you can be walking around with it anyway, you can be passing it on to everybody else without knowing. And I think there are millions of people doing that. So it doesn't matter what level of lockdown you have, unless you physically lock everybody down in their houses and somebody else does their shopping. But who's going to do that? Let's remember that worked in China, because China are a totalitarian state where they all live in big apartment blocks that are controlled by the government. So literally the apartment block managers were going out and shopping on behalf of all the people in the apartment blocks. That's not going to work in a democracy. So we're playing around the edges of something which I don't think is actually going to make much difference.
Do you think the job is harder for our government because we are treading a very fine line at the moment between maintaining our democracy and not? We've spoken about democracy a lot in the last 3 years because of obviously Brexit and everything else. Do you think it's because we are dancing on that line of still trying to maintain some form of democracy, personal choice and that kind of thing? Do you think that's making things very, very difficult from a government point of view of making these decisions?
I think it's difficult for governments to make decisions, but I don't think it's because of the democracy thing. Because realistically, we don't really have, we haven't got that much of a lockdown here at the moment. People's civil liberties haven't been eroded that much. They are still allowed to go out of their house, albeit for a walk and stuff. But no, I don't believe that it's democracy. I do think the government in this country do seem to be doing things slightly different, in as much as we almost seem to be, and this was certainly the case before the lockdown happened, we seem to almost leak things 2 or 3 days in advance that this may happen.
Yeah.
So people had a chance and an opportunity to get used to it in their head, and then we enacted it. I think we are not. You don't hear me very often saying things against anybody in this country, really, but I don't think as a society, the people in this country, we follow rules very well. I think we're very individualistic, which is our biggest asset. So I don't think a lockdown is going to work for very long in this country. I think if a lockdown in this country was any longer than 6 weeks, the people would just ignore it.
Yeah.
Be interesting to see this weekend. I think it's meant to be 19 degrees this weekend in East Anglia. And obviously, we've got some lovely coastal resorts. It will be really interesting to see how busy they are or not, as the case may be. Easter next week, kids have been in. It's easy for me to say I don't have kids, but if your kids have been shut in for the last 3 or 4 weeks, I just don't know if people are going to stick by the rules. And that you have to consider that. There's only point in enacting tough rules if people are going to abide by them.
Mm-hmm.
If they're not going to abide by them, what's the point?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this weekend will be a real demonstration of what people are actually made of and whether they're actually going to, listen to it, because we're seeing every day more and more deaths, which was to be expected. But we're also seeing this possibility of a really glorious weekend weather-wise. We saw all those idiots in Felixstowe and all the coast just before the lockdown, which gave the government a really good way of sort of saying, look, can't really behave, so we're going to have to do this semi-lockdown thing. If people don't behave this weekend, I fully expect it to be a proper lockdown. I really do. I think this weekend will tell.
When you say a proper lockdown, the only next step as far as a lockdown is concerned, look, we're not going to do a China. We're not going to lock people in their houses. It's impossible. We can't do it. We're not set up for that. It just won't work. The only possible next step is to close non-essential businesses, but that won't stop people travelling to the coast. It's already you're only supposed to be in the car to make essential journeys. So there's already legislation in place where the police could stop people driving to the coast at the weekend if they want to. So I certainly don't think a stricter lockdown will actually change that. But at some point, and I'm never Mr. Popular anyway, but at some point you have to remember if you're this lockdown only happened last week. Let's remember that over 70s and those in vulnerable positions were asked to self-isolate from not the Monday we've just had, the Monday before. So this is virtually the end of their second week. Well, as most people don't take 14 days to develop the symptoms, we're not going to see those numbers if there's been any change till the week after. So it'll be difficult to say whether it's working or not, but if we can concentrate on those, then I think we can actually start relaxing things for some other sections of society, because you have to remember we cannot protect everybody. It was shown last night. I can't remember the gentleman's name. He's a reporter on BBC. I was sad enough to watch they used to do the Brexit cast with Laura Koonsberg, and they do a coronavirus version now. And I watched that yesterday evening, and one of the presenters on there got his hands on one of those antibody tests, one of the ones that we're creating.
Oh, I saw.
And he took it.
Yeah, I saw a random thing of it, and it said he had corona.
Yeah.
And the antibodies.
Yeah. No, he said he had the antibodies. So It's not a test to see if you've got corona. It's similar to a pregnancy test, in as much as not this bit. So it's a prick your finger and get a couple of drops of blood out, but then you put it in this kind of like a handheld device that looks a bit like a pregnancy tester thing, and the lines come up. So two lines come up, meaning you have got the antibodies. Now, he was saying it's actually quite scary because he hadn't had any symptoms. So as far as he was aware, this test is telling him that he's had COVID-19 at some point in his life, and that he's now got the antibodies for it. And that's why I'm saying I think this is a bit of a waste of time, because, so many of us have got it that are walking around. It's all well and good saying, OK, with a bit of self-isolation, that means we're not giving it to everybody else. But I've got to go to the supermarket at the weekend. Now, I don't care how far away I stay from somebody at the supermarket. I'm going to touch more things than go in my trolley, just because nature is I might pick up that and choose that one instead or whatever. I'm going to touch the trolley for a start. I'm going to touch the keypad on the machine to pay with. So if I was asymptomatic, I could go to my supermarket, and as I'm doing shopping for a few people, I'll probably go to 2 or 3 supermarkets, and I could spread it to 30, 40, 50, 100 people within the space of an hour. And everybody's going to a supermarket. So somebody tell me, what is the actual point of locking down the general population rather than those most at risk?
So if you have the antibodies and you've had corona in the past, can you still carry it to other people?
So your own... If you haven't got coronavirus now, then of course you can't give it to anybody else. No, you can only pass on what you've actually got. If you haven't got it anymore, then you can't pass it on.
Yeah.
The thing we don't know at the moment is what kind of immunity it gives you. So obviously viruses fall into a couple of categories. You've got viruses a bit like German measles, chicken pox, you can only get once. The antibodies are strong enough so to give you immunity for life, which is why you get inoculated against German measles when you're younger, because then you'll build up for life. Most coronaviruses, which is the flu family, don't have that. They only give, which is why you have to have a flu jab every year, because the virus mutates each year. And so this year's flu is slightly different from last year's. So last year's jab won't give you immunity. But what they're saying about this coronavirus, the actual makeup of the virus has hardly altered at all between now, the cases that you're getting in the States, let's say, compared to the first cases you got in China. It's pretty much the same virus. So it doesn't look like the virus is mutating at all, which scientists say leads you to believe that it will give you long-term immunity rather than short-term.
Okay, I understand.
So that's the only positive thing that's coming out of this. The science is saying that it looks like it's going to be one of those viruses that we can eradicate relatively easily as and when a vaccine becomes available, rather than having a seasonal thing like we do with flu.
Okay, I'm with you then.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, well, we shall see. But, I'm trying to stay positive and trying to look at beyond this, which is what we were originally sort of talking about, is the positive unintended consequences that will come from this. And the future, as much as the present seems scary, the future, I think, looks quite exciting from a young person's point of view who wants to see all these positive changes. I think there's a lot of things that can be done, and I'm hoping that it will continue in the future. Are you positive, Ian?
I think it gives us an opportunity, but it will be very easy for countries to slip right back into the same mode they were in before. It gives most countries the opportunity to reset their economies a little bit and make some of the changes that perhaps they didn't have the guts to make beforehand. Let's face it, if there wasn't a good time to discuss social care in this country, then when is there going to be? So I'd like to think that, we come up with some long-term plans for pensions, for social care, for looking after the more elderly in our society. And it is possible, obviously, to enact lots of changes. You have to bear in mind, it's all well and good to say, it's very positive. I'm always a glass half full person like that. But this is going to cost an absolute fortune. It will have to be paid for. Does that mean that you're going to get another round of austerity? I don't think the country can possibly do that. So I don't really know how that's going to work. The one thing I do know is that one of the unintended consequences of this, which I'm not in favour of, being a particularly right-wing conservative, is that undoubtedly tax will increase.
Yeah.
Across the world, it'll have to, because the only people that are really paying for this is people. Tax will have to increase, and I'm not talking about by 1 or 2 pence. I can see a massive change in tax, as much as 3, 4, 5 pence in the pound, maybe. Certainly, I think VAT might change. There'll be some big changes in tax and national insurance. I possibly think, which again is another unintended consequence, this could signal the death knell for self-employment. Self-employment has always been something that this country's been really, really good at, and has been the lifeblood of conservative policy for many, many a year. Self-employment has always been, you pay lower taxes in return for not having so much of a safety net. But really what's been proven during this crisis is that safety net has to be there for the self-employed. And it's already been alluded to, if you're going to rely on that safety net, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to pay the same level of tax. And once you make self-employment a similar level of tax to PAYE, it negates the benefits of doing it.
Yeah.
So I think that, and no, you don't necessarily look at that bad thing. I think it gives a country a real chance, an opportunity to make some fundamental changes. But let's not forget, want to be this with a party of enterprise, of small government, and of low taxation. So I actually have nightmares at the moment, because we are now big government, high intervention, massive state intervention, and tax will have to go up to pay for it. So it's everything I've spent the last 20 years campaigning against.
Yeah, I agree. It makes me incredibly nervous. And every time there's like this new announcement, I'm like, how much? How much are we spending here? And it's possibly necessary right now. Certainly, as a Conservative, doesn't make me feel any comfortable at all. And there was a massive hint by Rishi that the taxation system is going to change, and things are going to be fairer. But let's not forget, self-employed people, they don't have holiday entitlement, they don't have a pension scheme, they've got to pay into that themselves, and all this other protection that's just not there generally with self-employment. And so that, like you said, that offset was you pay less taxes because you're less of a burden on the state. And if they're going to pay exactly the same amount of tax as someone who's employed, I think there's going to be some real problems, because this is a really rare thing. I don't think there can be too many changes, and I think the general public need to understand the importance of self-employment as well, because there's a huge call now for, well, yeah, change all the taxes. Everyone taxes the same. Well, actually, the risks aren't the same.
No, nobody said taxes was going to be the same. No, nobody actually stated that.
I read between the lines with what Rishi Sunak was saying, and he
was talking. Yeah, he was very specifically talking about national insurance. He was very specifically talking about national insurance. But certainly, yeah, there's got to be some. There's definitely got to be some give and take on the finance side. But as a Conservative, I want to see us get back. Now, I'm very pleased that we're putting these things in place to protect business. And admittedly, a lot of it's been done on the back of a fag packet, and so that does mean that we're almost bringing out a prototype and bringing it to market, as it were. So yeah, changes have to be made. I know there were some changes this morning to the business grant relief scheme, and those changes will carry on, because let's face it, these policies were enacted in a matter of days, and that's why I disagree with the media so wholeheartedly about them knocking nearly every policy that's come out with, because they've got to realise this is not like normal government policy where they've spent months and months and months bringing it up, and of course knock somebody if there's holes in it. But anybody that thinks that any of these policies that come out are not going to have holes in is living on a different planet. Sorry, should be living on a different planet, because it's unfair to think a government can come up with completely new legislation that's going to provide a safety net for everybody in a matter of days. It just can't happen. And so people, I think there needs to be a bit more. And the funny thing is that I actually think the public do have this as showing the fact that we've got such good approval ratings at the moment.
Yeah.
I know, it's amazing, isn't it? Which is a bit just soul destroying for me, considering I was supposed to be up for election next month.
Correct.
Riding the crest of a Boris wave, but I'm not up till next year now.
And I lost miserably because of May's performance. So
yeah. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
But certainly, that I think economically, it could be really. Obviously, there's some tough times, but it could be a chance to right some of the wrongs that there are in our economics at the moment without changing it too much, because what we have to remember is that we actually came from quite a strong base to begin with.
Yeah,
we had a strong economy. We were putting on jobs, but another unintended consequence that I've just been thinking, has been talking about this, is universal credit, which has actually got quite a lot of good press over the last few days, because commentators are coming out now and agreeing that universal credit is doing what the old system could never have even had a hope of doing.
No, absolutely.
And now that people are getting emergency payments within 2 or 3 days, it's managed to cope. Was it, I read, 950,000 people have applied for it?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty sure about that. Yeah, I mean, it's an unprecedented amount of things. I mean, I've gone through the system of universal credit, and it was fine. There was absolutely a bit of a delay because it's a new system. It was exactly the same as if you had to fill in a form and post it off and then wait for someone to process it. It's going to take the same amount of time. I've never ever had a problem. I've had a claim paused, but then you've just go online, and then they come back to you, no problem. You don't make that noise as you type in. And so it's never really gone wrong for me. And people go, oh, you're in the minority. I don't think I ever was in the minority. It's just people like to scream about it. I think the minority screams about it because when something goes wrong, it goes horribly wrong.
Yeah, but Sam, you did. I agree with you. And I like the fact that you do champion universal credit, and I admire that. But you were in a slightly different position when you applied for universal credit. So the weight that you had to endure didn't put you in too much of financial hardship compared to some people.
Didn't, but
now,
it was honest.
You know me. Yeah. But you know me. I'm a great champion of universal credit, and I think it's brilliant. But the 5-week wait is untenable, and I don't even know how we, as a government, we could have even gone into it thinking that could have worked. But the fact now that we're managing to get payments out in 2 or 3 days, and it's things like this which I think are good unintended consequences. So the government have found out that we can get emergency payments out to people in 2 or 3 days. So you tell me now then, when this is over, why can't that be the case for all universal credit claimants? They can claim an emergency payment in 2 or 3 days.
Yeah, but I could have always done that. I didn't, because I didn't need to. But you always had the option.
Sam, I don't think it's ever been. I know you can claim emergency payments, but I don't think we're ever really been at the state where people are getting them within 2 or 3 days.
No.
I don't think so. I don't think we've ever been that good.
I mean, the only negative I saw was when you apply, it doesn't say if you're successful, you would be entitled to X. So what it should do is let you know, because you could fall into the trap of applying, getting your emergency payment, and then turns out you're not eligible for it, and then you've got a debt fundamentally. But and then you also know how much to borrow as well in that interim if you're told in advance how much you could be entitled to. So that's what was always lacking. I don't know whether they will put that in place now, but we've got an unprecedented amount of demand for it, and they are churning it out. And these people are probably working from home and doing everything that we're all told to be doing as well. So I think, it's an incredible testament to how well-oiled the machine has become. And I'm glad that the press are finally giving it the credit that it always was due.
Well, when you say well-oiled and how good it's become, one of the only, let's not forget, the only reason that this can work is because it's an online-based system, which is what a lot of its critics were actually attacking it for the most. It was an online-based system. But actually, I think the knowledge is now going to be, yes, it's an online-based system, which means actually it's available to far more people than what it would be if it wasn't. In the old system, you used to have to literally go and sign on, and you'd have to have had an advisor meet you. Well, and you might have been claiming for 3 or 4 or 5 different benefits. Just imagine how untenable that would have been at this particular time. It would never have worked. And the very thing that a lot of the left in politics have been knocking universal credit for has been the very thing that has seen it enable best part of 1 million people to have money in their bank when they didn't think they were going to have any money coming in for weeks. So it's, like I say, its biggest problems have actually been its biggest advantages.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really positive thing. I'm sure Ian Duncan Smith is sitting there in his little house in Chingford giving us a wry smile, because finally we've realised that his idea was an absolutely cracking idea.
It was, yeah. And I'm glad he's going to get some recognition for it, is he? No, probably not.
No, probably not.
So, I mean, it's scary times ahead, but I genuinely think that the future is bright for us as a country. And I think we'll come out the other end of it in a weaker economical situation, but everyone will be. But the ideas, the drive forward for real positive changes, I think is going to be strong. And most importantly, the community spirit around us hopefully will continue, and we'll enter into a new phase in this country, which will be a little bit like what I imagine it used to be back in the day, that people always talk about. This is what it was like post-war, and people coming together and helping each other out. We've lost that in recent years, and hopefully we're going to get that back again. So I'm really feeling once I'm actually allowed to see people, I might be a bit more huggy. So sorry, but I'm going to be a bit more huggy.
A bit more?
Yeah, I'm going to get to the point
That's
where
not possible.
But I think, it's positive. I'm not sure whether it's positive or a negative, but
can we say whereas I practiced social distancing anyway.
Yeah.
Whereas I always used to tell people I had a 1 meter exclusion zone around me. I'm just going to say that's 2 now. So yeah, I've always had an exclusion zone around me, and long may that continue.
I just never.
So I like the fact you're positive. And just to end on another positive note, this actually could be a really good prelude to Brexit, because this is bringing the country together in an adverse situation in much the same way that Brexit brought people together as well, very disparate groups of people who all support the same thing. But I think, potentially, I think that'll give the country a lot more confidence to actually go into Brexit with a renewed hope, because they'll think to themselves, well, hang on, if we could get through this, and we could do this, and we could do this, and we could do this on our own, there's no reason why we can't do Brexit on our own, because what good would be what good possibly would we have got extra for being in this club? Nothing.
Yeah.
Apart from we'd have been saddled with a lot bigger portion of the bill.
Agreed.
Which I haven't quite worked out yet. If us still being, although we've left, but we're still in transition, if we're still liable for any of the money they're going to spend in this bailout.
Well, I would be.
If we are, I'd say we cancel a transition now and just leave with no deal.
Yeah. Do you think it'll be extended?
Difficult to say.
Better not be.
Difficult to say, because we don't really know what's going on behind the scenes. I actually think there's stuff going on at the moment between us and the EU, but I think that it would probably be the wrong time for them to get any publicity for it, because I think if the public knew that there were talks and discussions going on, they would very much be, well, why are you discussing that when we've got this crisis? You should be discussing this. You should be discussing this. But no, I think that there's discussions going on now, but I actually think that, you don't really need many discussions. The only discussion really needs to be one person on one end of the phone, one person on the other end of the phone saying, do you want a free trade deal? Yeah. Okay. Bye. And that's it. Really, you don't need to spend more than 20 seconds on it. Do you want to just have what you had before? Yes. Look, we're going to have to take something away from you, so we'll take this away from you. So we're going to give you this, because let's face it, they're going to be the one thing that's been proven throughout all of this is that the supply chains that we thought we were worried about, fresh food, medicine, medical supplies, okay, they've survived all this. So even though there is horrendously bad coronavirus in the places where we get the majority of our fresh food from, Spain and the Netherlands, they're still sending it to us every day. So that just shows that regardless of how much pressure there is in an internal country, if there's a market out there, i.e. the UK, that is going to pay more than their internal market pays, then they will sell to it. Even if that means, it must have been a struggle for some Spanish and Italian producers to get their fresh produce to us over the last couple of weeks, but they've still got it to us.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
All right then.
Yeah.
Wow, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it has actually. Yeah, I think we should do it this distance more often.
You're a git. You really are.
And
right.
you've definitely fidgeted more than me today. You haven't stopped going around on that chair all afternoon.
It's probably the wine.
That's usually what you're nudging me for.
Yeah, get us another drink. Yeah, another positive is I get to drink during the day because I have nowhere to drive to. Makes me a nice.
Unbelievable. You old stoke. Right. Okay. This is me signing off then.
All right. Bye.
I've got to work out how to sign it off first. It took me ages to work out how to get it on. I don't know how to get it off. See ya.